This innovation moment is brought to you by Syncrude, where 35 years of research and testing has led us to a significant milestone, the oil sands' first commercial demonstration of aquatic reclamation. Mine tailings are contained under the water layer, which is already home to a variety of aquatic life, including algae, insects, and zooplankton. This innovative technology is not just a first for Syncrude, it's a first for the industry, and another example of how Syncrude always strives for a better way.
The Ryan Jespersen Show, weekday mornings at 9 on 630 CHED.
If you're a regular listener, you know that Luke is here. Are you the chair of A Pupil, or you're the director, or what title have they given you?
Well, it's unofficial. I'm the main mouthpiece, I think.
You're the main mouthpiece for Alberta parents for unbiased, public, inclusive learning. Right now, lawyers in Saskatchewan's appeal court, this is today, addressing the question of whether the province can or should pay for non-Catholic students attending Catholic schools. So background, Ched Nation, 2 years ago, a judge ruled that doing so actually infringed on religious neutrality and equality rights. So Catholic school leaders and parents voiced their concerns, and the province appealed. And Tom Irvine this morning, in his opening statement, speaking for Saskatchewan's Attorney General, said that under the Constitution Act, the public and separate school systems together make up the public education sector.
They have the same statutory duties and obligations. They are both public institutions in a way that independent schools are not. And as we will argue, together they make up the complete code that is covered by the constitutional guarantees for religious education in the Saskatchewan school system.
So 5 judges with Saskatchewan's top court will listen to 2 days of hearings. Dwight Newman teaches law at the University of Saskatchewan, says he wouldn't be surprised if this case winds up before the Supreme Court. Luke, take us into this. Can you really dumb this down for us? I mean, if you were explaining this to a group of folks that had no idea about constitutionality and the notwithstanding clause and the history of Catholic and public schools in the provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta, make this accessible to us.
Okay. Saskatchewan, the reason a court case in Saskatchewan is relevant to us in Alberta is that Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario are the only 3 provinces in Canada that still have Catholic separate education. And the paperwork under which Alberta and Saskatchewan came into Confederation is identical. So any court case that goes on in Saskatchewan has a direct bearing on Alberta. And as we correctly heard here, this court case, I mean, the original issue started in 2003. The original court case, known as Theodore, started in 2005. And here we are, 2019, and we're still probably going to take a run to the Supreme Court. So we'll probably get a response from the court in maybe 6 months.
So this was a couple of different, please correct me at any point if I'm wrong on anything. This was essentially 2 school divisions facing off, squaring off in a legal battle, right? A public division squaring off against a Catholic division because the Catholic division was, in layman's terms, recruiting non-Catholic students and taking revenue, funding from the public division, correct?
That's correct. The original issue was actually because the public school district decided to close the school because it couldn't support it anymore, and the townspeople used a loophole, and we see this happen in Alberta as well, used the loophole to create a Catholic school where most of the students weren't Catholic because they'd just come from the public school. And of course, then all those students and all that revenue went from the public school district to the Catholic school district. Now, if you transpose that to Alberta, we have 170,000 students, give or take, in Catholic schools here. Let's say that 1 in 3 are not Catholic. We spend $12,500 a year per student. That's about $700 million a year that flow into a Catholic school system that should be flowing into a public school system.
Where are you getting your numbers that 1 in 3 students in Alberta's Catholic schools are non-Catholic?
That's so we've been doing this for a long time, and I would say that number is fairly accurate based on a bunch of beavers that are working behind the scenes.
Okay, so you're kind of spitballing.
No, we're better than spitballing.
Okay.
There are some people doing some work right now on these numbers. They are not my numbers to give. The numbers aren't finalized.
Oh, I see. So you've been made privy to research in progress.
Yes. Let's go with that. And I am confident that 1 in 3 will not be an unreasonable approximation.
Okay, well, for now, for the purposes of this conversation, we'll take that.
Yep.
We'll take that number and we'll work with it. And it proves later down the line to be incorrect or inaccurate.
I'll stand by it.
Then, or we'll just return to it and continue the conversation. So the argument, though, that it was unconstitutional, or that it essentially was, I suppose, back in Theodore, was based on the fact that students that should have had a robust public learning opportunity were being denied that based on Catholic schools recruiting. Am I barking up the wrong tree here? Or no?
It is complex, this issue. It is nuanced. So we, of course, in the Charter, have neutrality of the state in the matter of religion. Except for Section 29 gives this special right to Catholics or Protestants, if they are the minority, and only those two, to have separate education. But as the judge ruled in the previous court case, Catholics wanted a separate school system. They wanted to be separate from everybody else. Well, they got that, and the idea was to protect Catholics and Catholic education. They got that, but now what's happening is they're using money to recruit non-Catholics to come to their schools, and they're using public dollars to do that. Well, that, the judge ruled, infringed upon the neutrality that the state is supposed to have in the matter of religion.
Okay, so Nathan's listening in from Sylvan Lake, and he says, well, what does it matter if non-Catholic kids go to a Catholic school? Maybe they like that school better.
Okay, so the issue of choice is a really great conversation, and it's a conversation we should have. Now, whether Catholic and everybody else is the best choice that we can have in our education system, I think is questionable. But let's have that conversation. But here's the thing: you can't say we want Catholic education because it's a charter right, and then when recruiting non-Catholics and taking public money, takes a charter right away from non-Catholics and public education, you can't say we're going to ignore that charter right. So this is the issue here. You can't argue that you want the charter right for Catholic education and then ignore the charter right for religious neutrality, or the fact that money has been taken away from public education. If you want to have a conversation about choice, great, let's have that conversation.
One of the things you said, and you put a little emphasis on it, and I wanted to circle back to it. We're talking to Luke Fevin. I should clarify, by the way, as well, we've also reached out to the Edmonton Catholic School Board. We were hoping to have kind of a panel in here today, and per their right, and perhaps predictably, they've said, listen, they're not going to comment on matters before the court right now. So that's the Edmonton Catholic School Board. They were invited to have this conversation, certainly will be invited down the line on the show. They know the doors is open, but they said it's a matter before the court. We're going to decline comment. You talked about Catholic and Protestant students, and you said only those two. You said, and only those two.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about this conversation we're having in 2019 is we're talking about running an education system based on basically who won the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759, I think that was, and then of course Canada comes into existence 150 odd years ago now. And then we come into Confederation in, I think, was it 1904, 1905? The school system is based on only recognizing two religions, both of them Christian, Protestant and Catholic. No one else gets this right. And of course, in Alberta, it's only Catholics.
And people will say, well, it's enshrined in the Alberta Act, Luke. You know that.
Yeah, well, so The fact that it's enshrined in the Alberta Act is a terrible argument for anything, really. The fact that we've always done things this way. I mean, let me give you an example. Women didn't used to have the right to vote. Actually, neither did First Nations and non-landowners. It was only wealthy men. If that was part of the Constitution, would you say leave it alone, or would you say no, this makes no sense?
Well, some people might argue to leave it alone. Yeah. Hey, Luke, throw the headphones on. We have an impromptu call from Janina. You control your own volume there on the unit if you can hear that okay. Janina, you're a teacher, is that correct?
No, I come from a family of teachers.
Oh, okay.
And, I myself, I put my kids through the Catholic school district. I've got family that teaches for the Catholic school district. And I disagree because people who are non-Catholics and of different faiths, whether they're Muslim or non-Christian, a lot of them are choosing to go to the Catholic system, and they're trying to fight to get into it. And even though maybe they're not practicing, a lot of them are getting their kids baptized, and they want them to learn religion, and they want them to learn that. So I don't think that the Catholic school district is out there doing it. There are people who really, really want the Catholic school and are choosing it.
Luke?
Thanks. I think you make a great point. There are a number of things to unpack here. Firstly, it is my argument that a lot of people go to Catholic schools not because it's Catholic, but despite it's Catholic, the fact that it's Catholic. I think most people choose a school because of where it is, because of the bus times.
No, that's incorrect. I've talked to so many parents. When my kids went to school, they went to school with Muslim children just because that they liked the atmosphere. They liked the way things were taught. They just liked it better. That was just their choice. Okay,
so I've been having this conversation with hundreds, if not 1,000 people over the last, I think, 7 years now. We ran a poll fairly recently, about 3 months ago, and we found that most people that chose a Catholic school didn't choose it because it was Catholic. They chose it because of its location, because of the bell times, bus times.
Well, then that's a totally different issue.
Can I speak?
Yeah, Janine, I'll thank you for your call. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you dialing in. Okay, Luke, take it away.
Now, there are absolutely some people that choose it because it's a Catholic school, it's a religious school, and that's what they want for their children. No arguing there. Some people choose it, I have heard, because they feel that there are better ethics or more morals or something like that. It's not an argument that stands up to me, but I have heard it, and I acknowledge it. But the reality is, we all need just a good school, and people choose good schools, and they choose it because it's convenient, because of bus times, because it's got a great sports program or an art program, because it's where your other kids went, because your friends go there. And the reality is, in a lot of places, we don't have enough schools. I could build a school in the name of Cyril the Happy Squirrel in some neighborhoods, and it would be full by the end of next week, because people choose it based on other considerations.
This year, challenge yourself to do something epic. The Enbridge Ride to Conquer Cancer, benefiting the Alberta Cancer Foundation, presented by Evraz, is your chance to join thousands of other riders united in one epic goal: to conquer cancer. 2 days and over 200 kilometers, the ride is a challenge, and it's meant to be. When you sign up, you'll begin to raise vital funds, enabling the Alberta Cancer Foundation to invest in diagnosing cancer earlier, improving the effectiveness of cancer treatment, enhancing quality of life, and reducing the risk of developing cancer for patients and families across Alberta. Register today at conquercancer.ca and save $50 when you use promo code PODCAST at sign-up. Again, that's promo code PODCAST at conquercancer.ca.
Luke Fevin, our guest in studio. He's the director of the Society of Edmonton Atheists. He's also the main mouthpiece for A Pupil, Alberta Parents for Unbiased Public Learning, or Public Inclusive Learning, on the text line. And I'll let you know, by the way, and Luke, thanks for agreeing to stick around. We're going to do Luke Fevin takes angry calls after the 11:30 headlines. So you can save your angry calls for after 11:30, and Luke will hit them head on. Listener says, he's such a good atheist, that Luke, always digging on Catholic schools. What about the funding for Muslim schools, Francophone schools, and private schools?
Okay, and I hear this a lot. Okay, so two things here. Firstly, the fact that I'm an atheist may inform my viewpoint to some degree, but it's not really relevant. I mean, there are an awful lot of Catholic, Christian, and religious people that also agree that the separate school system is outdated, it's unfair, and it's not the best use of our funds. And the other thing is to say that just because I have a particular viewpoint means that I'm biased and my viewpoint is irrelevant. Well, the same would then apply to anyone that is religious or that works for the church. They're clearly biased and their opinion therefore doesn't matter. Now, as far as funding is concerned, firstly, as far as Francophone schools are concerned, French is one of two official languages in Canada, so there is no argument with Francophone schools here. The second thing is that there is no official religion for Canada, so the fact that we in Alberta fully publicly fund over 400 Catholic schools over and above every other religion makes absolutely no sense, because other religious schools, there are some fully funded Christian schools as well, but most religious schools that aren't Christian are private, and they only receive 60 to 70% of the operational funding, which is only about 50% of the overall funding.
This is something that you spend a lot of time, I mean, this is kind of your area of passion, at least the one that's most prominent with your social media activity and your volunteer involvement and what you spend your waking hours on. Why is this so important to you?
Education is important. It's critically important. So on this issue, you can be for Catholic schools, and you can be, let's say you're Catholic or you're Christian, and you have this particular privilege that no one else has. You like this privilege and you want to keep it. Makes total sense. Maybe you're not Christian, but you grew up here. This is normal. It's not broke, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone. Okay, that can accept that argument too, but there are arguments against it. Why privilege one religion over all others with tax dollars is one. Why operate a duplicate non-cooperative school system that wastes perhaps a couple $100 million a year in inefficiencies is another. Should the state even be involved in operating 400 schools for 170,000 children to indoctrinate them into worshipping gods is another argument. But the thing is, none of those are the important arguments. I'd overshare a little bit here. I've worked in leading edge technology for 3 decades on 3 continents. It's my thing. My most recent project, helping organizations deal with what's called digital transformation. And that is coping with change. Change is coming hard, it's coming fast. I don't think the average person in the street understands or appreciates just where we're at on the hockey stick. We have children entering the education system right now. We don't know what jobs they're going to be doing when they come out in 15 years. And I don't mean we don't know what job Billy's going to have. We don't even have the ability to describe what that job might be. We don't know what microeconomies are going to look like, macroeconomies, what careers are going to look like. Change itself is such a huge issue. And we need to be having a conversation right now, especially in Alberta, with the issues that we have with our reliance on a single industry. We need to be having a conversation about what is the best possible education system for this province, for our educators, for our kids, for the future. And we're stuck in this boat anchor of a conversation about whether this one religious group should continue with a privilege from centuries ago, and it's really getting in the way of us having a conversation about designing the absolute best possible education system for the future of this province.
The Ryan Jespersen Show, weekday mornings at 9 on 630 CHED.